Hello, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today we are presenting webinar on how to steer your future with an unlimited idea organized by Applied Science and Humanities Department of Parul Polytechnic Institute, Parul University. The main agenda of this webinar is to learn how to become an entrepreneur and what type of idea develops the future and generate different thoughts for the better future. I, Vaishali Naswani, would like to introduce today's guest speaker, Hassan Yones from Australia. Hassan Yones is a keynote speaker, author, and a successful entrepreneur. He has a background in aerospace engineering, organizational change, and business management across multiple diverse industries and over 2 decades in the education and training sector. Throughout his professional career, he has utilized his skills and experience in business management
Hello, ma'am.
to build to build
Hello, ma'am.
sorry his professional career. He has
Hello, ma'am.
utilized his skills and experience in business management to build a successful vocational training organizational, multiple travel agencies, built an international education facility in the Philippines, and managed investment and property development projects. He holds an honors degree in aerospace engineering from RMIT in Melbourne and other qualifications in business administration, business management, accounting, and education. As the founder and CEO of the Training College of Australia, his passion is to raise the standards of early childhood educators and leaders in all business sectors. He is also the founder and chairperson of the International Academy of Maravai, managing director at Caradon Investments, founder and senior business coach for Lenovo Business Services, and is the managing director at the Ardennes Park Early Childhood Learning Center. Complacency is a silent killer for many successful business and can have disastrous outcomes. He shares, he shares his knowledge and experience in captivating keynote presentations and workshops with powerful stories and strategies that transform business leaders and businesses. He is the president of Professional Speakers Australia for Victoria for 2021. His number one book selling Why Complacency Kills was released in 2020. It's a privilege to welcome you, sir, and you can start with the session.
Thank you very much for the nice and warm introduction. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be invited to this webinar. And I will just share my slideshow now. Okay, I'd like to start with failure does not just happen. Failure is caused. Failure is caused by our own doing. And yes, I agree that failure forms part of our learning and it's part of life, part of our growth. And sometimes failure can be forgivable if we learn from it. But failure due to complacency is totally different story. Failure due to complacency is almost punishable. Now, I would like to ask the audience a question. When you look back on your life, which do you regret more? Things that you tried and failed at, or things that you failed to try? Now, I'd like the audience to hold on to that thought, and we will get back to this question at the end of this session. Yeah. Now, we've heard this saying, and people say it quite often, that the more you fail, the more you are likely to succeed. Now, this may have some truth to it, but there are many cases where this doesn't actually occur, especially in our current world. See, when we look at our documented history, we find ourselves in total sadness and despair as we reflect on tragic events that have occurred throughout our history. Civil wars, world wars, workplace disasters, transportation accidents, global and local economic depressions, pandemics, acts of terrorism, and famine. And when we read the news about the corporate failures in the news or on TV, we can see easily that these failures are just due to the lax nature of management in the face of changing markets, of changing environments. Now, without naming specific companies or businesses around the world, but most of them failed to innovate in the face of advancing technologies and changing markets. Now, you may be thinking, if you're a business leader or leader, you may think, oh, this will never happen to me. But it does, and it will, unless people begin to realize that complacency is a silent killer. And it may strike anyone, regardless of race, success, gender, country, etc. And if you're feeling okay, then let me tell you, you're not. If you're feeling okay, then you're not. See, we tend to be okay with everything around us until it becomes too late. Did you know that only 12% of the original Fortune 500 companies from 1955 are still in existence today? That is a staggering number. So it means 88% of these Fortune companies have totally failed and collapsed. Yeah. In Australia, on average, there's about 260,000 businesses that shut down every year. This is just Australia alone. And this is pre-COVID era. This is before COVID came along. On average, every year in Australia, 260,000 businesses close down. And this is also another staggering figure. And we will look at the causes of these failures. So going to the question, what do you think has caused this failure, this collapse of these businesses and companies? If you can just reflect on that for a few seconds, Now, while the individual stories of these failed businesses differ or may be different, but they have one thing in common. The cause of this failure is that contentment leads to complacency. Contentment leads to complacency. And we know for a fact that complacency kills. Now, these companies that have failed and collapsed, they have failed to recognize the threats and failed to respond to factors in the marketplace, causing them to fail. And the sad part of this is that these corporate failures and the bankruptcies could have been avoided. And another sad part of this is that no business, small or medium or large, or regardless of which country it is immune from leadership complacency. Now, you may wonder, what does leadership complacency look like? Or what is complacent leadership? See, complacent leadership is when business leaders, CEOs, managers, and owners become self-satisfied or self-contented on how their business or their organization is performing, while unaware of the dangers occurring around and within their business. Leadership complacency is when leaders neglect the essential elements of efficiently managing their business, such as doing a business plan, marketing plan, risk management plan, staff training plan, and so on and so forth. Now, there are different types of complacencies, and I want to go through that briefly before I move into the real sort of like in-depth elements. But there are 5 types of complacencies that we as human beings will go through. The first one is organizational complacency. And this has to do more with complacent leadership, which leads down to complacent management, complacent teams, and the entire organization. And this is why many of the global brands, even the local brands in your local markets, fail and collapse because of organizational complacency. The second one is health complacency. And this is where we as individuals become complacent about our own health, and we start to neglect our own essential health elements. Now, millions of people die every year globally due to health complacency, because we neglect, we become lazy. And again, sadly, all these deaths, all these millions of people that have died, they could have been avoided, they could have been saved. According to the World Health Organization, the leading cause of death is heart disease, with an average about 17 million deaths every year around the world. And heart disease is one of the easiest diseases to actually treat and fix. Once again, it's sad that this could have been avoided. Another one is personal complacency. This is where we become complacent about our relationships with our spouses, with our wives, with our husbands, with our friends, with our children, with our relatives, with our colleagues and friends. This is where, when we become complacent in our personal lives, this is where relationships fall apart and break up. And in many cases, personal complacency can be irreversible. The next one is engineering complacency. Now, coming from an engineer background, as you heard in the introduction, and based on our catastrophic disasters due to malfunctioning of man-made structures and elements, this is a serious threat to the safety and well-being for all of us, because we all use man-made engineering structures and vehicles and so on and so forth. This type of complacency has happened in the past and may happen again in the future if correct measures and approaches are not taken or not carried out. And the last one is the medical complacency. See, misdiagnosis occurs all the time in the medical world, leading to avoidable deaths all around the world. With my high respect and regard to our global medical community, our scientists, our doctors, our nurses, and paramedics who work tirelessly to save lives. But misdiagnosis can still occur if we are not vigilant enough, and we see that on a personal level. So these are, I wanted briefly to cover these 5 types of complacencies that we as people and our human beings live through. Yeah. Now, let's go through the signs of complacency. How can we tell that we're complacent? How can you tell that you're actually being complacent right now in your work, in your family, in your career, etc., and so forth? The first one is denial and ignorance. When it comes to complacency, it is easily identifiable that there's an element of ignorance and denial. And this is obviously part of the self-satisfaction that we go through. Denial of the need for change is one of the main culprits for our complacency. The need for change might be clear and evident, but we're feeling so comfortable, and then we see no reason to change. Then it's highly likely that we won't change. Like, take, for example, being overweight, where it's physically evident that something needs to change. You know, we need to lose weight, we need to exercise, we need to eat healthy, and so on and so forth. But denying or ignoring this means that we continue to be on the same path and continue to risk our health. The second one is routine and comfort zone. See, routines make us feel safe. They make us feel secure and they make us feel comfortable. Routines eliminate the need for us to think hard or excessively to carry out tasks, which means that it's easy for us to ignore risks and dangers. And the third one, and we'll probably feel that and think it all the time, is it ain't gonna happen to me. And this is one of the most dangerous elements of complacency. We tend to believe that nothing bad will come our way, ever. We tend to believe that we are immune to negative elements of life, especially diseases and illnesses in this current pandemic situation or in our careers in life. The number 4 symptom is the limiting beliefs and the self-esteem. Self-satisfaction is when our thoughts start to create beliefs of how well things are going for us, personally or professionally, or how there's no need to initiate any change because we have resistance to change. Our thoughts and beliefs become so strong about our situation that anything deviating from these thoughts gets filtered out and ignored. Our thoughts ignore reality. The danger or risks become closer and ever present. And at times, well, most of the time, it will be too late to take any corrective measures or take action to avoid these dangers or the subsequent results. And the last one is the status quo. See, we as humans have the natural tendency or instinct to belong. We have the need to belong to our family, to our culture, to our religion, to our country, to colleagues, to friends, to social groups. These are our status quo. Now, with this need comes the natural desire to follow this status quo. Good, bad, negative, or positive, we tend to follow it blindly. And this is another danger of complacency because we blindly follow regardless of risks or dangers. And many times we actually can see that. We see the risks, but we still follow the status quo because we believe that they are right. Now, change may at times mean diverting from the status quo, and it can mean doing things differently from everyone else. Now, complacency is like the dark side of the success coin. Yeah. Now, I'm sure, our audience, each of you have achieved a number of ambitious goals so far in your lives, professionally and personally. You have worked hard to get where you are now. You've obviously you would have acknowledged and celebrated those successes that you achieved. But what happens when you have finally climbed that mountain and then that you have been conquering for so long? What will happen when you reach that top and you achieved all the things that you wanted to achieve? See, many business leaders or organizational leaders sit at the top without asking the critical question, where do we go from here? We achieve these great successes, we achieve the great milestones, we get this highest education, we get our businesses going, we get our careers and families going, all that. Then we stop and we say, where do we go from here? You see, complacency is a failure masked as success. I will say that again. Complacency is failure masked as success. It's the feeling that you have achieved it all and you're comfortable in your current position. Then all too often people don't realize that these seemingly positive emotions and achievements and the goals that we have achieved are mistakes waiting to happen. Now, what do you do when we have reached the top of the mountain and we've enjoyed the view, we've worked hard, we got to the top, we we enjoy the scenery and everything with it. The only way after that is going down. And that's exactly what happens to you, to your career, to your business, relationship, if you believe that you have achieved everything. You get stuck in that feeling of comfort, not willing to disrupt the status quo again. And I want to share with you a secret as well. That's exactly how I failed in my business. But before I share with you my story of how I tremendously failed in my business, I want to talk to you about my ideas. Ideas. It is when leaders reach that peak of their success, it is then when they fail to come up with new ideas to move forward. And when you look at this cycle here, right? On top it says lack of ideas, and on the bottom it says new ideas. When we reach the top of the cycle, because we consumed all of the ideas to get to that success level on top, that's when our ideas at the minimum. We run out of ideas when we become successful, right? See, leaders believe that they have exhausted every idea in getting to the top. And when they're at that point of success, at the top, that's when when they start to go downhill and fall. Right? So I graduated in 1997 with an honors degree in aerospace engineering from RMIT University. And I secured an excellent career with the Australian Department of Defense, with the Australian Air Force. Then I went on to become a project manager with Boeing commercial airplanes. But with a young family to support at that time, we were struggling to make ends meet. And I wanted to achieve financial freedom and flexibility for my family. So I established multiple successful businesses, including a childcare center, 3 travel agencies, a registered training organization, international school in the Philippines, and other businesses. I think you saw the logos from before the previous slides. Now, in 2012, I resigned from my aerospace career to focus on our childcare business. And the childcare industry was booming, and our childcare business was booming. And cash flow was coming in. We were making some decent money. Then I became comfortable. I became contented, carefree, careless. I became complacent. And I developed this attitude that, we can do it tomorrow. Well, we'll do it tomorrow. Well, yeah, that's fine. We're good. We'll do it tomorrow. Then I turned my weekends into 3-day weekends and then 4-day weekends. And at times, I rarely turned up to work, to my own business. For 12 months, I stopped working in my business. And I stopped working on my business because I had become complacent. I remember one time my personal assistant, she was concerned, and she came to me and said, Hassan, who's managing your business? Then I looked at her, and was like, I am. I'm in charge. I'm managing my business. I'm the boss. And then she replied to me and said, are you? You see, I didn't understand what she meant with her question at that time, because I became unaware of that our administrative and management staff had lost focus. My entire team had acquired my careless and carefree attitude. My team had become complacent, just like me. And it was my fault. So week after week, we started losing customers, and our cash flow started to drop below our break-even lines. We reached the point where we could not afford to pay our wages, staff wages. My family struggled financially to the point where I could not find $1 for my daughter's lunchbox. That morning, we searched the entire house looking for $1 to give to my daughter to buy something to eat. And that was my lowest point. With a sad look on her face, I dropped her off at school that day with no lunch. Now, can you imagine as a father or as a mother, as a parent, being in that situation, dropping your daughter off and knowing that she will not have lunch that day? And it was all my fault. I was afraid to answer my phone, knowing that debt collectors were chasing me for their money. We were receiving legal notices and warnings in the mail almost daily. And the bank gave me an ultimatum. Fix your business or we will take over to recover the funds. See, I had put my family into this situation. I had put my business into this situation. And it was at that point, that lowest point in my life, that I decided, okay, I need to step back into my business. And I had to come up with different ideas to save my business from the brink of total failure. I had to steer my business with an idea. Now, I want to share with you this steer framework that will guide you to avoid complacency creeping up in your life, in your career, in your business, in your leadership, or even in your organization. Right? But before I dive into the steer framework in more details, let's go back and let's talk about ideas. Yeah? See, without ideas, there can be no progress. Without ideas, we just stay stagnant or idle, if you like. Ideas that we have in our head that come to our minds, if we follow them through, ideas bring change. And when we introduce change into our life, into our career, into our business, into our work, into our family, we eliminate the state of complacency. You see, complacency results in the absence of change. Right? So therefore, the level of ideas is directly inversely proportional to complacency. The lower number of ideas we have in our heads, right, the higher the complacency. Right? If we have lots of ideas going through our heads to improve different things or follow different paths and all that, the higher the number of ideas and that we follow through, the lower the complacency. And if you see this chart, you look at this chart, you can see that if you go up with the levels of ideas, your complacency levels will drop. And vice versa, inverse proportional. So if we're really complacent, then you'll find that a person will have no ideas in their head. They're stagnant. They're idle. Yeah. So, and the best ideas that come to us is when we are in despair. I'll say it again. The best ideas come to us when we are in despair. And when we are in search for our needs, that's when the best ideas come to us. When we are successful or doing great, less ideas come to our head as our needs are being met. Now, this is, again, I'm using this wheel again, this wheel of ideas. This is how it's represented. Yeah. So now let's go and dive into the steer framework. Now, the steer framework is a very simple framework, and it's based on my 6 weeks professional development program that I deliver, but I've sort of like condensed it a little bit into a smaller version. The first, let's look at the ideas segment of it, identification. Yeah. The identification phase is the starting point. You need to identify, right, your strength, your weaknesses, the values, the traits, your capabilities, your skills. Right? What are you good at? What are you not good at? Right? That's the first element of the idea development. Right? Identify these elements: your strength, your weaknesses, your capabilities, your skills, and your self-awareness, etc. The second phase is the development phase, and that's when you develop the skills and the true values and your true vision, your objectives, your goals, your milestones. And only then will you be able to achieve the transformation. The enforcement phase, right? So you need to, once you develop your goals and true values and things like that, that's when you go into the enforcement phase. Yeah? You implement. The enforcement phase is the implementation process of the idea process. And the last one is the assessment. See, we need to continuously assess where we're at. Even going through the first cycle, we need to go back and then re-identify, redevelop, reinforce, and then re-identify, redevelop, reinforce. It's a continuous cycle, right? That's why it's in a cycle version, because if we stop at one element, then we fall trap to complacency once again, and everything will stop, right? So we'll go now from the idea phase, because I'm going to come back to the idea segment again. So if we dive deeper, so think of the idea as your steering wheel in the car, right? Your steering wheel, which connects to the hub of the steering wheel, and it drives down to the shaft, to the wheels, which allows you to steer your car. It allows you to steer your vehicle in the right direction, in the direction that you want to go, right? Not in the direction that the car wants to go, right? So let's look at the self-awareness. Yeah. Now, self-awareness, there's a difference between thinking who you are and knowing who you are. And thinking who you are is based on our, and I will go, is based on our self-concept, and I will go deeper in the next slide. Right? Thinking who you are does not mean that you know who you are. And these are two different elements. That's why you see on the slide, it's like two different directions. And we need to go from thinking who we are to knowing who we are. Right? Now, there was the Harvard Business Review released a research that said between 10% to 15% of general population believe, sorry, let me rephrase that. 95% of the population believe that they are self-aware. That means they know who they are. That's the survey. 95% of the population believe they know who they are. But the actual survey itself, the results of the survey, the same survey itself, shows that only 10 to 15% of the population actually are self-aware. So us in the audience, I don't know how many people we have in the audience at the moment, but us in the audience, there's only 10% of us are actually self-aware. The rest of us think that we are self-aware, or think we know who we are, right? So let's talk about self-awareness, yeah? Self-awareness basically involves three elements: the self-concept, right? Which will unpack maybe. I don't think I can unpack it here. It's just a very lengthy process. The emotional intelligence and the self-assessment. So self-awareness involves three elements that we need to unpack to get to self-awareness. It's not a simple process. So self-concept is about four elements: the self-esteem, right? How how well do we feel about ourselves? Are we feeling well, self-worthy? Do we have confidence? We don't have confidence. Yeah, like are we worth it? Are we a worthy person? Are we capable? All of these things. So the self-esteem, the self-image. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, or the image that we have ourselves, I'm too fat. I'm not. This means I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm this and that. So that's the image that we have about ourselves. Our appearance will impose a self-concept image on ourselves. The self-efficacy, how efficient we are, right? We have this tendency to believe, oh, I'm not good at this. Oh, I don't want to try it. I don't want to experience this one because I don't know how to do it. I don't know. I can't do it. So we have this self-efficacy about our own capabilities, which may or may not be true. And obviously the last one is identity. So we identify ourselves, how we identify ourselves, right? Now these four components of self-concept, obviously each one is a module by itself and requires unpacking it. It's quite in depth, but I'm just trying to give a concept on how what self-awareness is. The next one is emotional intelligence. It's about self-motivation, right? So motivating yourself is similar to inspiration, but self-motivation is you motivate your own self within your mind. You don't go for external motivation. You self-motivate yourself. It's about empathy. It's about emotional self-awareness. Right? It's about self-regulations. This is all emotional intelligence. How we behave with people, how we respond to people's reactions, how we respond to our own emotions and feelings towards people. So this is all about emotional intelligence. And once again, this is a really in-depth study, right? Which we normally unpack quite deeply. So that's emotional intelligence. And then self-assessment is obviously determining your strengths and weaknesses, your behavior analysis, your values and your principles, your tolerances, your skills and capabilities, your mindset, your communication skills. This is all about self-assessment. And this one requires, again, multiple studies or multiple surveys for you to gain that understanding about yourself, the self-assessment. Now, the good news and the bad news. The good news is that starting from today, you can begin to improve yourself. You can't change your self-concept. You can't become self-aware. You can't change how your traits shape you. And the bad news is that the internal and external sources, right? External sources like your environment, your friends, your colleagues, your family, etc., and so on, have a profound impact on how you perceive yourself. Yeah. So, but the good news is we can control who we are. We can't control how we behave. We can't change and control that. So the next one would be transformation. Now on here, you will see there's two leaves. One is a green leaf and one is a brown leaf. Yeah. Now, if I asked you what's the difference between the two, okay, obviously, one of them is green, one of them is brown, one of them is fresh, maybe the other one is dry. But many people would say, oh, the leaf changed, right? The leaf changed from being green to brown, and it's dry and it's almost breaking apart, etc. But the fact is that this leaf actually transformed. Yeah. This leaf transformed itself. And transformation is very different to change. Take, for example, the classic caterpillar example. Obviously, caterpillar is a caterpillar and then transforms to a butterfly. But the transformation is permanent. So the butterfly cannot turn back into a caterpillar. Transformation is done. It's complete. Exactly with this leaf. Transformation is permanent. Whereas change is not. Change is reversible. So if you had told me that this leaf has changed itself, no, it hasn't. Because if it had changed itself, then it can change back. But it didn't change itself. It transformed. So that's why a transformation is important, and we need to look at the in terms of transforming ourselves into the better person, into the better leader, into the better father, into the better colleague, into the better student, into the better. We need to transform on how we are and who we are, and we can only transform by doing the first one, which is the self-awareness, knowing who we are, right? So transformation involves obviously five elements. Is changing our mindset. We start with changing our mindset, changing our goals or aligning our goals with our mindset. Right? And I'm not talking about, oh, I want a car, I want to buy a car, and I want to buy a mansion, or I'm not talking about materialistic things. I'm talking about your personal goals, your inner goals, your self goals, right? Yeah, like who you want to be. That's what I'm saying about goals. Capabilities, changing our capabilities. Maybe we need to upskill, we need to downskill, etc. Whatever. And then also talking about skills. And the last one, self-identity, which is the probably the most important one. Right? We need to identify ourselves, who we are, who we want to be. Okay, you cannot be someone else's image. It's you. You need to identify yourself. Okay, I am this person. I'm not the person that the other person wants me to be. So this is how transformation takes place. Obviously, again, this is an in-depth module as well. We go and dive into it, but we don't have the time here now. You establish your roadmap, you establish your strategies, you establish your plan, you establish your processes and your practices. Right? You need to establish once you do your self-awareness and you become transformation, then you establish these elements and you follow through. And the next one would be enforcing, which is implementing. So you enforce what you have established. You enforce the transformation. You enforce everything that you worked on. All of your foundation, you enforce it and you implement it and you go through with it. Right? And again, there's another module that goes in depth on how we do that. And the last one, reflections and reviews. This is the most important one as well, because if we don't reflect, we will stop progressing. If we don't reflect and review, we will stop improving. We will stop learning, right? We become stagnant. So we need to reflect and then repeat the cycle, every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever, however it is applicable, depending on how serious the changes are. Now, this is the steer model, and I'm trying to give you a snapshot. Obviously, I'm not able to unpack it all in detail here. But before I finish, I want to go back to the question that I asked at the beginning. Which one do you regret more? Things that you tried and failed at, or things that you failed to try? Yeah. So, which one do you regret more? And most people would answer the first one. They would regret the things that they tried and failed, because that's how most people are conditioned. Oh, we failed at that. Oh, then they start regretting. But actually, it's the second one that we should be focusing on. The regrets that we failed to try, because all good ideas are worth investigating. All good ideas are worth identifying. Right? And if we fail to try them, then we'll probably miss out on opportunities. So yeah. And before I finish up, I would like to leave you with one quote that it's so important. Everything that you worked so hard to create may disappear if you become complacent. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. Yes, sir. There are one or two questions from our end, sir.
Yes.
Yes. How can we stop complacency, sir?
Sorry, how can we stop
Complacency, yes.
complacency? How can we stop
Yes.
complacency? The number one cause of complacency is contentment. When we become contented with what we have, right? For a long period of time, we become contented. Then we stop looking. That's the number one thing that stops us from the. We need to celebrate what we achieve, yes, but we cannot be contented for a long period of time, because then we become stagnant. So complacency, like contentment, breeds complacency. So yeah. So that's why I said with the ideas, if we don't have ideas in our head, then we have complacency, right? And then contentment, if we are too contented, then there's no ideas, because we're just happy. We're just happy with what we have. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when we're contented, then we won't have many ideas, because we're happy where we are, how we are, and then we have complacency. So this is the simple answer, really.
Okay. So, what is the root of that complacency?
The roots of complacency.
Yeah.
Success. Yeah.
So after having success, just as you elaborated with your story, right?
Yeah, exactly right. We get so successful. And this is on a general terms. Even with as I mentioned before, with big companies, they become so successful that they say, oh, we dominated the market, we're good, we're the leaders, and they stop. They stop progressing, they stop improving, until other people come along and say, look, we can improve on this, or we can do better, or things like that. So success, although we strive for success, we go for success, but we shouldn't stop. Yeah. So success has to be a journey, like a very long journey. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly what happened to me.
Yes. You shared your story, that was beautiful. So you gave the example of yourself, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can we there's one question from one student, sir. How can we generate idea for innovation?
How can we
generate idea for innovation?
Ideas for innovation?
Innovation, yes.
Innovation. Look, innovation means creating something, creating something new, or new things, new elements. Have the mentality of there's always a better way. Just put that in your mind. There's always a better way of doing it. That is the key to innovation.
Okay.
Whatever, everything that's been designed and produced in our world today, iPhones, Apple iPhones, Tesla cars, BMWs, airplanes, internet, everything that's been created. Yeah, there's always a better way. And if people, us as leaders and as human beings, can have that in our mind, that there's always a better way, then we have the innovative mentality and we get ideas. Yeah.
From my side, one question. Yeah. Can you elaborate the last point, that was reflect?
Reflect, yes. Yeah. Reflect is when we do self-evaluation. Yeah. So at the start, we did the self-assessment, self-awareness, right? And then self-assessment, all of the things. And then towards the end, we do this self-evaluation. We evaluate ourselves. Yeah. And obviously, we ask ourselves self-evaluated questions, and we have modules that we go through and questions a lot, and that will give you an idea of where you're at in comparison to where you started with your self-awareness process, and then So that's how we get to the reflections phase, self-evaluation. But in the self-evaluation, we have to be very, very honest with ourselves. We may feel disappointed at times. We may feel like, yeah, but that's how it is. That's how we learn. That's how we improve. So the self-evaluation is very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, again, one question, sir. How can we improve ourselves in business management?
Improve ourselves in business management. Okay. There's, when it comes to leadership and management, when it comes to leadership, there's no there's no correct style. If I can speak about leadership first, and then I go to the management side. So in leadership, there's no straight answer or straight correct answer for the best type of leadership. Yeah, because sometimes leaders have to jump from different styles to effectively lead. And the same goes with management. We cannot be in management. We cannot be one. We cannot adopt one style. Yeah. Because in the end, we want our team to follow us. As manager, we want our team to follow us, to believe in us, and implement what we're doing, or what we want them to do, basically. So we cannot adopt one style of management. We have to always be flexible, right? Sometimes you have to be lean. Sometimes you have to be firm. Sometimes you have to be flexible. Sometimes you have to be compromise. So we cannot. And I know, like sometimes different countries have different management styles, right? Like managers, let's say in China, will be acting differently to managers in the Philippines, or managers in India, or managers in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth, right? But managers cannot be dictated by the culture. We have to be flexible. We have to look, okay, how best can they operate? How best can my team follow me? What's the best sort of like? So we have to be flexible and adaptable in that sense. Yeah. Hopefully it answered the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think we are done with the question and answer session. Thank you, sir, for giving us your valuable time.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and for this pleasure being on this webinar. Thank you very much.
Yes. I would like to thank the head of our department, Mr. Hemal Patel, sir, the HOF of our institute, Professor Jatin Vaidya, sir, the academic director, Dr. Mahesh Bhatt, sir, and president of our university, Dr. Devanshu Patel, sir, for motivating and supporting us continuously. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants who assembled here today for this webinar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And likewise, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Mr. Hamel for the invitation, and for the entire leadership and management team of Parole University. I do apologize if I don't know the names, but I extend my gratitude to the senior leadership of Parole University for this opportunity, and to yourself for moderating this.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye, sir.
Bye-bye for now.